And I think that there's a third issue, and I know I'll be very brief with it, but I think the third issue, and I think that this is actually bigger than we can sort of suss out at this point, is that we're all approaching this from a filmic and television perspective, right? Like that's kind of where we've all come from. That's kind of the production value that we see as being valuable. I would say that certainly within the course of the last year and a half to 2 years, certainly based on the statistics that were released last week, is that individuals have become quite good storytellers. I had mentioned just before the panel, the Facebook version of me is way cooler than I am. And so starting to look at those sorts of things as narrative tools and inferred meaning through things like Twitter around shared events, I think that that's starting to create, I mean, Sarah talked about it first thing this morning about mashups and taking media and putting it together and creating meaning out of events or moments that are important and relevant to particular individuals, and then creating a shared experience around that. I think that those sorts of models that are starting to be investigated and played with are the things that will ultimately unlock our sense of what interactive narrative can and should be.
You started by saying that your Facebook story is more interesting than your story.
Yeah, so?
Who cares about your Facebook story?
Right, I'm trying to say. What's that?
Who cares about your Facebook story?
Me.
Right. So does that
And
have
my
mass
300
appeal?
friends,
Right.
close friends.
Right.
Yeah, and my network of people.
Yeah.
That's right, and who cares about, I mean, that's the argument that's always like, who cares about people who Twitter? Like, you know, you talk to anybody over 50, they're like, why the hell do you people Twitter? Like, who cares that you had a banana? You know, like,
Right.
But, I mean, there's a lot of people who care you had a banana, right? And there's an interesting story in there about eating a banana, you know, maybe.
Okay.
Well, I think that leads to sort of an interesting. What is mass market important to the genre? Can it be mass market if it starts to become more fragmented and personal, like you're talking about? What would a mass market success look like for this?
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is that because we're expanding into so many different niches and ever nichifying planet or whatever, but our definition of mainstream is being diluted, and I think for me, I take some of the keynote about making it about the story that I get and the story for me, as opposed to. I think there's importance in the shared experience, but I also think that it's really interesting to know that the story is completely tailored to my needs, and that's where I bring in a separate model of interactivity, which is that the authorship is a little more algorithmic. I was saying to Daniel and Mike, and that the idea of it is. Because we now are starting to know more about our audience, we're able to tailor it differently, the same way that an oral storytelling culture would be able to tailor each story to the audience. We're learning that sort of stuff through things like Google's measurement of my web traffic and my email and my calendar and things like that. Or the other example I gave was like iTunes Genius, where I know now what my tastes are, and that can influence so much about how I experience a story, but the story still can be linear, and it's definitely not mainstream because I only get the story that's for me.
Yeah, and I think that that's cool, and I think that there's places for that, and I think that that kind of authorial control that's algorithmic is kind of interesting. However, I think that we are social creatures by nature, and we were talking about it just as we were walking down, like. I think Lost is a great model of an interactive story. Like, they never tell you what's going on. You literally are lost, half the time.
Oh, I know
and it's
what's
all,
going on.
yeah, and it's all, you see, and it's all about running to work the next day and sitting around the computer and people putting their headphones on because they don't want to hear what happened, and then inferring meaning, like trying to figure out what the story is. It's going to be really disappointing, at the end, because it's going to be cheese, right? But it's the whole build up to that really is an interactive story. And so I think that one-to-many and that shared experience is absolutely critical to crack this nut. I agree with you. I think that there will be experiences that are one-to-one, that are based on algorithm and based on those sorts of things, but I think that inferred meaning and shared experience and mass whatever that is absolutely critical
But
to make this thing survive.
This goes back to your point about who are the creators of Lost. There aren't guys like that all over the place just sitting at their computers able to tell that story. There's only very few J.J. Abrams out there that are that talented. And obviously everybody else that works on the show, those shows don't just happen in somebody's basement.
No,
They do
you're right.
require money and hiring the talent required to produce them. So.
Yeah, I'm just saying that the model's kind of interesting.
Yes,
I'm not-
absolutely.
and obviously it takes some talent to do it, except for season 2. Clearly there was nobody. There was nobody at the Switch there. But yeah, he was
Making Star Trek.
he was doing Star Trek or Alias or whatever. But I just think it's a good model. And so to answer that question, like who cares about interactive storytelling? I think that people do. I think ultimately there's a market out there and there's an audience who sort of crave that sort of thing.
Well,
I don't think it's just a wank for us to be up here talking about it.
If you're passionate about something, then you want to feel like you can get involved.
Right.
But I think what Evan was talking about was more personalised storytelling. So, I mean, personalised storytelling could be a parent telling a child a story they made up. That's personalised storytelling. I think that's the other thing we need to think about, is that this isn't about technology. I mean, sitting around a campfire and everyone doing one line of a story and going around the circle, that's interactive storytelling. So we just now have a lot more tools at our disposal to tell stories in different platforms.
But the one-to-many thing, the only reason I say that is because what worries me about the one-to-one is like, you know, I have this great one-to-one story because it's produced by whatever, and then I'm like, I go to a friend and I'm like, God, you can believe it, this guy, he ate a banana, and it was like,
There's no water cooler moment.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, you had to be there. And
Yeah.
then the sort of story loses its...
No, I'm just saying this is
Western,
like a
yeah.
niche
But
of
then-
interactive storytelling.
I mean,
personally.
you know, in the troubadour days, then you'd pay for him to come and tell you the story. You know,
But
come
banana.
to your village and do it again. And it's
Yeah.
a totally different business model. I mean, it's been really interesting for us to see like media in general as being mediated stories of us separating the audience and the storyteller. And it's really been thousands of years that we've been doing these interactive stories before we invented these things that would package a story and seal it in time and say that's the only version you get to see. We've been quite natural at interactive storytelling and adjusting it and personalizing it, but it's also, I don't know, it's a different business model though. Is that you're not getting paid for this story, you're getting paid for the next story.
I'm going to get to a question in 1 second. I just have one thing to say, which is that sort of what I've been hearing is that there are a lot of different subtleties to the ways you could define an interactive story. And I think so often the way people want to package interactive storytelling is maybe it's just strictly choose your own adventure. I think that one of the challenges that I've found trying to pitch these things is that everybody wants to put what you're doing into a bin that they can then explain to somebody else. And when you talk about a Lost model, for instance, that I very much doubt J.J. Abrams went into the network and told them about the evolving way the narrative would be constructed by people going into work and talking about it and not talking about it and constructing it in their own mind, but that's a happy accident that happens. And one of the hard things is in this genre to sort of try and package something in a way that you can sell it or give it to an advertiser, but to also allow for that to be unpackaged enough or for that narrative to evolve. And I'm just wondering like how you would define your ability to